7 seconds. That was the predicted lifespan of an American machine gunner once the first round left the barrel. Every soldier in the unit knew this number. Despite the statistics, M60 crews in the Vietnam War operated as mobile centers of destruction. They fired until the barrels glowed red, intentionally drawing every piece of enemy fire in the area. These men became the primary targets for North Vietnamese snipers and Viet Cong ambushes. Why was the risk so high? The math was simple. One machine gun held the power of an entire squad. To stop an American advance, the enemy had to silence the gunner first. The origins of this weapon trace back to 1945. After World War II, the United States military brass analyzed German combat footage. They studied the MG-34 and the MG-42. These were general-purpose machine guns that could be carried by one man, but fire with the intensity of a heavy tripod weapon. The Pentagon wanted that level of lethality. Engineers began prototyping. The result was the M60. In the 1960s, the war in Southeast Asia changed everything. The standard M16 rifle used 5.56 mm ammunition. These rounds were light and fast, but they lacked weight. In the dense jungles of Vietnam, light bullets often deflected off thick leaves or shattered against tree trunks. The enemy stayed hidden behind heavy teak wood and earthen bunkers. The M60 changed the physics of the fight. It utilized the 7.62 by 51 mm NATO round. This was a heavy, punchy projectile. It did not stop for vines or tall grass. It shredded foliage, punched through timber, and struck targets hiding behind cover. The sound of the M60 was a slow, rhythmic chugging. Soldiers nicknamed it the pig. The footage from the era shows the reality of the job. A gunner stands in the tall elephant grass, draped in heavy belts of ammunition. 200 rounds hang from his shoulders. He pulls the trigger. The muzzle flash is visible even in daylight. Smoke pours from the receiver. He isn't just shooting at targets. He is suppressing an entire tree line so his squad can move. But the weapon had flaws. It weighed 23 pounds empty. Adding ammunition and a spare barrel increased the load to nearly 50 pounds. In 90-degree heat and 100% humidity, the weight was a physical burden. The gunner struggled through mud and uphill through dense brush. Every shot was a signal. The muzzle blast revealed the gunner's position instantly. As soon as the M60 opened up, the enemy focused all mortars and small arms on that single flash. The gunner had to keep firing to keep the enemy's heads down. If he stopped to reload, the protection vanished. Events accelerated on the battlefield. The M60 became the backbone of every infantry platoon. It was used on Huey helicopters, patrol boats, and tripod mounts in fire bases. It was the only thing that could break a concentrated enemy assault. Without it, the squad was outgunned. The sound of the heavy bolt racking signaled the start of the engagement. The gunner pulled the trigger and waited for the return fire. He knew the clock was ticking. 7 seconds was all the time he was promised. The pig remained the primary heavy hitter for decades. One machine gun per squad. This was the foundation of American infantry tactics in Vietnam. The primary role of the weapon was simple: suppressive fire. The gunner pinned enemy forces to the dirt while his squad moved to a better position or retreated. During patrols, the gunner took the flanks. During an ambush, he moved to the front. He needed the widest field of fire possible to stop a charging enemy. But the machine gunner was never stationary for long. As soon as the trigger was pulled, the gun became a magnet for every North Vietnamese rifle and rocket-propelled grenade in the area. The entire battlefield focused on the gunner's muzzle flash. He fired a burst, then he moved. He fired another, then he relocated again. Staying in one spot was a death sentence. The weapon of choice was the M60. It was powerful, but it came with a massive physical cost. The gun weighed 23 pounds. Soldiers nicknamed it the pig because of its bulk and the difficulty of carrying it through the mud, heat, and humidity of the jungle. It was a heavy, awkward piece of steel. How fast could it fire? Between 500 and 650 rounds per minute. A standard 100-round belt vanished in exactly 11 seconds. The gun was heavy, but the ammunition was the real burden. A gun team's survival depended on how many belts they could haul through the brush. The mission dictated the load. For a quick night raid, 3 or 4 belts were enough for the initial contact. But on major operations, the crew carried every bullet they could physically lift. The load was divided among 3 men. The gunner carried the weapon and 200 rounds. The assistant gunner followed with a spare barrel and more belts. Finally, the ammo bearer, known as the mule, lugged the remaining heavy boxes. Why did they call him the mule? Because the weight was crushing. A single 100-round belt weighed 6 pounds. To keep the weapon firing, a crew needed a minimum of 1,200 rounds. In reality, most teams carried between 2,000 and 4,000 rounds. Every man in the squad helped. They draped belts around their necks like heavy brass scarves. The ammunition had a specific sequence. Every 5th round was a tracer. These glowing projectiles allowed the gunner to track his fire in the dark. There was another benefit. Helicopter crews used these streaks of light to identify friendly positions during chaotic night battles. The colors told the story. Americans used red tracers, while the Viet Cong used green. Did the soldiers complain? Constantly. They hated the weight of the steel and the brass. But when an ambush began, the complaints stopped. No one ever asked for less ammunition in a firefight. Supplies vanished in minutes during intense combat. Running out of belts during a breakthrough was the ultimate nightmare. The pig had to be fed. Without ammo, it was just 23 pounds of useless metal. Thus, the squad moved as a single organism centered around the gun. 10.5 kilograms. That was the weight of the M60 machine gun. It was a heavy burden for a single soldier, but this weight provided a devastating advantage. One gunner could saturate a tree line with 500 rounds per minute. In the dense jungles of Vietnam, this volume of fire was the only thing that kept a squad alive. The Viet Cong understood this. The North Vietnamese army understood this. They feared the weapon. But fear led to a specific tactic. They prioritized the gunner as the primary target. How did they neutralize a squad? They silenced the M60 first. In an ambush, the opening shots did not target the officer. The bullets flew toward the man with the heavy weapon. Snipers waited for hours to find the M60 crew in their sights. The casualty rates among gunners soared. Every man carrying the M60 knew he was the most hunted person in the jungle. The pressure was constant. The sound of a single sniper shot meant the gunner was likely the target. Patrols were designed around the gun. A standard team included the gunner and 2 riflemen. These riflemen did not just provide security, they were pack mules carrying hundreds of extra rounds. An NCO supervised the team to ensure the gun was positioned for maximum carnage. The manual required a tripod for stability. The reality was different. The tripod stayed at the base. It was too heavy. It snagged on vines. Units abandoned it to stay mobile. The M60 had to be ready to fire from the hip or a bipod at a moment's notice. The footage shows a common sight: soldiers draped in ammo belts. They crisscrossed their chests like bandits. New recruits thought it looked intimidating. It was a deadly mistake. The belts caught on thorns. They gathered mud and jungle debris. A single bent link or a dirty round meant a jammed weapon. In a firefight, a jam was a death sentence. Inexperienced crews often loaded only short belts, forcing them to reload while under fire. The veterans did things differently. They kept their ammunition pristine. Every link was checked for grit. Some gunners used a battlefield hack. They took cloth bags designed for claymore mines. They stuffed these bags with 300 linked rounds and attached them directly to the gun. This allowed for immediate, sustained fire during a surprise attack. No fumbling, no tangles. But the M60 was not limited to the infantry. It appeared everywhere. The weapon was bolted to jeeps. It was mounted on the turrets of tanks. It hung from the doors of Huey helicopters. The machine gun was the backbone of the American presence. 750 rounds. That was the capacity of a single ammunition belt fed from a metal minigun can. Crew members often linked 3 or 4 100-round belts together. They needed long, sustained bursts of fire to suppress the enemy. These weapons were the backbone of helicopter operations. They were mounted on gunships and transport Hueys. On board, door gunners faced extreme conditions while raining fire from the sky. But the machine gun had serious mechanical flaws. Heat was the first enemy. During intense firefights, the M60 overheated rapidly. The gunner had to change the barrel frequently to prevent the metal from warping. Then there was the jungle itself. Mud, grit, and tropical rain entered the internal mechanism. Jamming became a constant threat. The operator had to spend hours cleaning and oiling every part. In the field, after days of rain, maintenance became impossible. One failure was particularly lethal. It was called a runaway gun. The weapon would keep firing even after the gunner released the trigger. The mechanism simply locked into a cycle of continuous fire. The gunner had to physically wrestle the vibrating weapon to keep it pointed at the enemy. Meanwhile, the assistant gunner had to grab the ammunition belt and pull with all his strength to break the link. It was a terrifying moment. Thousands of rounds could be wasted, or worse, hit friendly troops in the chaos. How did they keep the gun running? Practice. Reloading was a three-step action. Flip the top cover, lay the belt, snap it shut. After 200 rounds, the barrel turned glowing red. The assistant gunner wore a heavy asbestos glove to grab the burning steel. He swapped it for a cold barrel in seconds. This required a cool head while under direct fire. A single trained team could shift the tide of a battle in seconds. Patrols relied on their gunners for survival during an ambush. Operators knew their weapons intimately. They learned to sense a jam before it happened. They practiced assembly and disassembly while blindfolded to simulate a night attack. They turned maintenance into a competition of speed and precision. The footage shows the evolution of the weapon. Over decades, the military released the M60E3 and M60E4 versions. These models fixed the overheating issues and reduced the weight. Today, modern variants are still in active service around the world. The M60 remains a symbol of raw firepower. Both the men who carried it and the enemies who faced it remember the sound. The story of the M60 is inseparable from the men in the air. Door gunners operated in open doorways with no protection. Their task was the most dangerous in the sky. The mission ended, but the weapons stayed.